Sky News in the UK recently announced that the UK's passport has become one of the worst value passports in the world, ranking passports from best value to worst. Today, I'm going to tell you what they found and where your passport ranks. The criteria they used were how many visa-free countries can your passport get you into? What does it cost to issue you a passport, and how many years is that new passport going to be valid for? Then they did some calculations. So let's take the UAE, for example, 184 visa-free countries. They've done a great job improving the quality of that passport, getting visa-free access to countries all over Africa that very few countries have. They've really beefed that passport up. And to print out a passport, they charge you £10 and 82 pence, about 13 US dollars. It's good for 10 years. That costs you barely £1 a year, $1.30. And that is 0.37% of the average monthly salary. So they gave that the highest overall score. So basically, it's not an impediment. The idea is that some Western countries are raising the price to issue their passport. This is actually a point in favor of a country like the UAE, where they're trying to actually be more responsive to their citizens. They're trying to move in the right direction. That, hey, if it costs us £10 and 82 pence to print it out, like, we're not trying to make a markup on this. Our civil servants have to be somewhat efficient. I don't live in Dubai, but when you go there, things are efficient. And you can imagine this is a country where if you're a citizen, they're just going to charge you the low price to get a passport. Spain charges about £26. They've got 194 visa-free countries. The passport's good for 10 years. Costs you about 1.28% of the average monthly salary. South Korea, Poland, Latvia, Hungary, Singapore, Estonia, the Czech Republic, and Lithuania all came in the top 10, with the most expensive passport being in Lithuania. It's £43, and that's about 3.3% of a monthly salary there. And then so you go through some of the European countries. Argentina scored at 17, Hong Kong's SAR China passports came in at 18. The Netherlands, were they one of the ones that recently raised their fee? They're coming in at £72. So obviously higher salaries there, that's 2% of your income. Argentina, though, 9.33% of your income, £31 to get your passport issued for 10 years. 10%, I mean, that makes it a little bit harder to travel, right? And that's a country that is, I mean, obviously we think that Argentina could be doing some stuff that's going to be good in the long run, but for right now, 10% of a salary just to get a passport to have the chance to leave. So most of these countries, with those exceptions, are in Europe. You see Mauritius at 23rd, £12 for a passport that's good for 10 years. That's pretty good. Belgium's passports, I did not know this, are good for 7 years. They're charging you £56. So Malaysia comes in at 33rd. That's 5% of your income for a month to get a passport, £33 and 70 pence. Japan, my goodness, costs you over $100 to get a passport. So what do you see? You see the big Western countries, the legacy brand countries, as we say, the US, the UK, they get bad scores. And that was the point of this article. The UK has slipped to 35th place. You can go to 192 countries visa-free, which it's not much worse than, Japan, worse than Japan, right? There's plenty of passports these days as good as the UK passport, but they're now charging you £88.50 to renew your passport for 10 years. That still is under 3% of your monthly income, but the price has gone up. And so you ask yourself, how come the UK, how come the US, how come New Zealand at £99? My goodness. Canada at £93? Why does it cost these legacy brand English-speaking countries so much? Now, this was an interesting article on Sky News. And quite frankly, if you're a Nomad Capitalist, whether it costs you $13 or $113 to get a passport, that's probably not going to be your impediment. Just get a passport. And one thing that I would tell everybody is if you don't have your home country's passport, do that today, even if you don't plan on traveling. You have to have your home country's passport. Now, we rank the passports every year on our annual Nomad Passport Index. We don't take into consideration how much does it cost to print the physical document. We look at, yes, how many countries you can go to. Western countries have, generally speaking, Tier A passports. They can go to a lot of countries. But what we look at is what's the underlying citizenship worth. And so, price is what you pay. Value is what you get. If you're paying that high price to get a U.S. passport, what you're getting is a document that when you travel around the world, banks, some will take you and some won't. You're going to be subject to U.S. regulations no matter where you go. You're going to be subject to paying U.S. taxes no matter where you go. So yeah, the price to get that actual passport printed is higher, but the value that you get is much lower than, let's say, being a citizen of a country like the UAE, where you can live in your own country and you have zero personal income tax liability. Yes, I have been loud about saying there is, for most businesses now, there is a 9% tax. Yes, even in the free zones. The UAE for business is not, generally speaking, tax-free anymore for most businesses. But if you're an Emirati citizen, you can go anywhere you want to live, get a residence permit and pay tax there or not. You have far fewer restrictions. You do have countries, not just the US. I mean, even South Korea was mentioned. There are certain countries you're not allowed to go to. The US says you're not allowed to go to North Korea. South Korea says there are more countries that their citizens can't go to keep them safe. You may like that, and if you do, be a Korean citizen. We've talked to a few of our clients about the option of becoming or reclaiming their Korean citizenship. But if you don't like the idea of your country telling you where you can go, or that you have to pay tax even if you don't live there, or that you've got to follow regulations while you're doing business somewhere else, then the passport you carry says a lot more than just how many countries you can visit. And the price of printing out a book isn't really what matters. Now, I talk about culture here. I think culture matters. The UAE is a country where the culture is, how do we learn how to do stuff efficiently? That's the way to grow a country. Let's hire experts in topics to run things, not political hacks. And so that same culture doesn't surprise me. Hey, let's get the passport books printed efficiently, get them to the citizens, don't mark it up. I mean, does it really cost New Zealand $130 to print out a passport book with a little chip in it? Does it really cost that? No, it's a bureaucracy. That tells you something about the country. It tells you how they choose to spend their money. They don't care about you. They care about the entrenched bureaucracy and keeping them well fed. And so the cost of printing out the book, to me, is much less concerning than talking about conscription. We hear from Europeans who are saying, yeah, we're hearing murmurs in our country about conscription. It's been talked about. Will the U.S. do some sort of conscription? Trump says he's not for it. People who've worked in the Trump administration the first time said, yeah, let's do it for national pride. No matter who gets elected, is that going to be something that happens? Is volunteer military numbers drop in countries like the U.S.? Will they go back to conscription? The U.K., the Conservatives openly talked about it. Let's have some kind of national service. You don't have a choice. Obviously, in countries like Israel and others, you have to join. There's just no way out. That tells you a lot more about what your passport is worth. To me, a passport where I have to go and join the military, even though I may not agree with what the country's doing, I have to risk my life for the politicians. That's the worst value passport. And unfortunately, there's talk of that coming to other places. Now, listen, you may be proud to go and serve in the military. That's fine. I mean, for you, it's not the worst value passport. But when you've seen what I've seen and you travel around the world and you see people who call their embassy, and most of the time the embassy doesn't even bother to answer the phone, let alone help, you're like, wait a second, I'm going to go and die for these people? I'm going to live in another country and not use their services and still pay taxes so that that person can work at an embassy and take a nice salary to not help me, their citizen, to not do the job that I thought they were here to do? Like, yeah, I don't want to go and line up to die for that country. That's a bad value passport. So conscription talk is increasing. Taxes obviously are increasing. And if you're not American, you can just leave your country until, of course, the governments get desperate. One of the things that I really see, this is, again, more focused on Western and really even English-speaking countries. Why is it everybody at the top has to pay all the taxes? There are people in the U.S. and Canada that are plenty wealthy. They're paying 40, 45%. They're not paying these loophole rates that guys with carried interest are paying. But, that's the narrative. A couple billionaires don't pay much in tax, and therefore nobody rich pays tax. Well, guess who they're going to come after? The rich guy who left the country to live overseas eventually. That nasty traitor, we don't need him. Go and tax him. The U.S. has gotten away with it for years. Why wouldn't Canada or Australia or some other countries do it? Some of their politicians have talked about it. We should do that. That's a bad value passport if that comes into play. Even the talk of it makes it a worse value passport, in my opinion. This is what happens when you live in a place where you don't get news what happens in the rest of the world. You think everywhere else is falling apart, everything else is a banana republic, no one else can travel anywhere, and you can. And I think really the worst value passports are going to be those in countries where they really think that they own you, they restrict you. And so if you can spend $200,000, which is the new price for Caribbean citizenship by investment, they've raised it. The days of $100,000 citizenship by investment are now over. They wanted to get along with the EU, with the US, and they wanted to, what they call, strengthen their program. I've been telling you the price is going to go up, but it's $200,000. Well, if price is what you pay and value is what you get, then perhaps having a passport from a country that they don't want you to be a criminal, they don't want you to be a maniac, but if you're just a normal law-abiding citizen, they'll gladly take you in. They're not going to tell you how to live your life. They're not going to bother you. They're not going to tax you. They're not going to threaten you. It's not how they live. It's not how they work. It's not how they exist. It'd be bad for business, but I just don't think it's in their bones. Most of these countries that I go to, it's not in their bones to bother their own citizens. So what's the excuse of the countries that charge a lot more? The excuse is we own you. You're going to pay for our bureaucracy. If you don't like it, we'll call you a name. We'll sick our politicians after you to say that, you should pay more taxes or we should impose more restrictions on you. What kind of a passport is that? That's a country where there's a negative value to citizenship. And so even if you were to spend $200,000 in the Caribbean, even if you were to spend close to $1 million in a place like Malta, and there are other passport programs around the world you can invest in, or you can get through Ancestry, or you can become naturalized. Price is what you pay, value is what you get. Who cares what it costs to get the passport book if that book is an anchor around your neck?